My name is Alyssa Grant. I'm 32 years old, and I founded a tech startup that I built from absolutely nothing. When I say nothing, I mean I slept on a friend's couch for 8 months while I coded 18 hours a day. I mean I missed Christmas with my family for 3 years straight because I couldn't afford the plane ticket and couldn't spare the time. I mean I burned friendships that I thought would last forever because I was so consumed by this vision of building something that mattered. I skipped birthdays, funerals, weddings. I said no to dates, to parties, to lazy Sunday mornings. I poured every ounce of my energy, my savings, my sanity into this company because I believed it could be something extraordinary. And it was. When I finally sold that company for $20 million, I thought the hard part was over. I thought I could finally breathe. I thought I could finally buy the one thing I had been chasing my entire life. Peace. I thought peace would look like finally having my parents' approval, finally hearing them say they were proud of me, finally feeling like I had earned my place in a family where I had always felt like an afterthought. But instead of peace, what I bought was silence. The kind of silence that falls over a room when someone says something they shouldn't have. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl because you know something is wrong even if you can't see it yet. The moment I told my parents the lie my lawyer instructed me to tell, the world around me shifted in ways I never could have predicted. My father didn't even call to check on me. He didn't ask if I was okay, didn't offer to help, didn't express concern or sympathy. He sent one cold message that still burns in my memory like a brand on my skin. Don't come home. We can't afford your recklessness. Recklessness. That was the word he chose. Not mistake, not misfortune, not bad luck. Recklessness. As if everything I had built and lost was simply a reflection of poor character rather than circumstances beyond my control. As if my value to this family could be measured entirely in dollar signs and nothing more. But the truth is, they never asked how I made the business succeed in the first place. They never asked about the late nights, the setbacks, the moments when I almost gave up. They never celebrated when I landed my first major client or when we hit our first million in revenue. They only seemed to notice me when there was something to gain. And now that they thought there was nothing left, they didn't even have the decency to pretend they cared about me as a person. What scared me most in that moment wasn't what they said. It was what they didn't say. The absence of love where there should have been unconditional support. The silence where there should have been comfort. The coldness where there should have been warmth. My lawyer, Simon, had warned me this would happen. He told me to do it tonight, then watch who contacts you first. He said the people who truly love you will reach out with concern. They'll ask how you're doing. They'll offer help even if they have nothing to give. But the people who only care about what you can do for them, they'll reveal themselves too. They just won't realize you're watching. I didn't understand the full weight of his words until my cousin Emma sent me a screenshot at 3 a.m. that changed everything I thought I knew about my family. The screenshot showed a private family group chat, one I wasn't supposed to be in, one I hadn't even known existed. And at the top of the conversation, my mother had written something that made my stomach drop through the floor and keep falling. This is our chance. 3 simple words that carried the weight of every betrayal I had ever feared. This is our chance. Chance for what, I wondered. What exactly were they planning? What opportunity had my misfortune created for them? My hands shook as I stared at the screenshot Emma had secretly forwarded to me, her own message attached reading simply, "I thought you should know." She didn't have to say anything else. The screenshot spoke louder than any explanation could. Beneath my mother's message, the rest of my family chimed in like vultures circling fresh prey, each one adding their own cruel perspective to the conversation. My Uncle Ray wrote, "If she's broke, she's useless. Pull the paperwork before she realizes." The callousness of those words still echoes in my mind. Useless. As if my entire worth as a human being, as a member of this family, could be erased by financial misfortune. As if the 32 years of my life, the memories we shared, the blood that connected us, meant nothing compared to the size of my bank account. My father added, "We move fast. Don't let her know about the trust." And then my sister Brooke chimed in with her own contribution to the cruelty. "I told you she'd crash. She never deserved any of it." A trust, paperwork. The words hit me like cold water thrown in my face on a winter morning. I had built a $20 million company from scratch, with no help, no connections, no handouts. And here was my family, discussing some trust I had never heard of, planning to cut me out of something I never knew existed. What trust? Why hadn't anyone told me? What had my grandmother left behind that they were so desperate to keep from me? And more importantly, what did they think I had done to deserve being cut out of it? The questions swirled in my mind like a storm, each one bringing fresh waves of anger, confusion, and pain. My lawyer's warning echoed in my memory with new and terrifying clarity. Now your parents aren't celebrating your success. They're calculating it. Do exactly what I say and you'll see their real faces. Simon had seen this coming before I even knew there was something to see. He had warned me that money changes people, that it reveals truths that were always there but hidden beneath the surface of polite society. And he was right. Because at 7:14 in the morning, like clockwork, my mother called. Not with comfort, not with concern, not with love or sympathy or any of the things a mother should offer her struggling child, but with a rehearsed voice that suddenly sounded like a stranger wearing my mother's face. "Alyssa, sweetheart, we need you to come by the house today. There are things we need to handle." Her tone was clipped, professional almost, as if she were conducting a business transaction rather than reaching out to her daughter in crisis. She didn't know I had seen the messages. She didn't know I knew about the trust. And she sure as hell didn't know I wasn't coming alone, because Simon had told me exactly what would happen next. And it terrified me more than anything I had ever experienced. The knowledge that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally were capable of something like this. The realization that every kindness, every gesture of support, every word of encouragement might have been nothing more than calculation all along. I drove toward my parents' house with a knot in my stomach that felt like a living thing, twisting and turning with every mile that passed. Simon's voice replayed in my head on an endless loop. "The moment they think you're broke, they'll show their intentions. Don't react. Observe. Observe." It was easy for him to say. He wasn't driving toward the house where he grew up, knowing that the people inside were plotting against him. He wasn't remembering birthday parties and Christmas mornings and family vacations, all while knowing those memories were built on lies. He wasn't feeling the weight of 32 years of conditional love crashing down around him. Easy to say, hard to do when betrayal is buzzing through your veins like poison, making your heart race and your hands shake, and your mind spin with questions that might never have answers. My childhood home looked smaller than I remembered when I pulled into the driveway. Or maybe I had simply outgrown the version of myself who once begged for their approval. The house was the same one I had grown up in, a modest colonial in a middle-class neighborhood where lawns were always manicured and secrets were always kept. I remembered riding my bike in this driveway, learning to drive in this cul-de-sac, sneaking out my bedroom window when I was 17 to meet a boy my parents didn't approve of. I remembered feeling safe here, protected, loved, but those memories felt like they belonged to someone else now. A younger, more naive version of myself who hadn't yet learned that family could be just as dangerous as strangers. When I stepped inside, the atmosphere was stiff, like they had rehearsed every breath, every movement, every word. My mother didn't hug me. She didn't touch me. She didn't even offer me a seat or ask if I wanted something to drink. She simply closed the door behind me and whispered, "We don't have long." "Your father is getting the documents." The urgency in her voice was palpable, but it wasn't the urgency of a mother worried about her child. It was the urgency of someone trying to get away with something before they get caught. My skin prickled with the realization that I was not a guest in this house. I was a target. My father appeared from the hallway with a thick envelope in his hands, my name printed on the front in bold letters. He didn't meet my eyes. He didn't smile. He didn't offer any greeting at all. He simply extended the envelope toward me and said, "Sign these. It's better for everyone if you do. Better for everyone." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. Better for everyone except me, I thought but didn't say. I could feel the weight of their expectation pressing down on me like a physical force. They needed me to sign something, and they needed me to do it quickly, before I had time to think or question or understand what I was agreeing to. My sister Brooke sat on the couch, arms crossed, smirking like she had been waiting years for this moment. The dynamic between us had always been complicated. She was 2 years younger, the baby of the family, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. While I worked myself to exhaustion building something from nothing, She had cruised through life on charm and good looks and the financial support of our parents. While I skipped holidays and burned friendships, she posted Instagram photos of exotic vacations and expensive dinners. While I fought for every scrap of approval, she received it unconditionally. And now, she was watching me struggle with barely concealed satisfaction. "Mom said you messed up big time," Brooke offered, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You always do." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. "You always do." As if failure was my default state. As if I had spent my life making mistakes while she had spent hers succeeding. The comparison wasn't fair and it wasn't accurate, but in that moment, it felt like the truth. It felt like everyone in this room agreed with her assessment. It felt like I had been found guilty of a crime I didn't commit, and my sentence was being handed down by the people who were supposed to love me most. The envelope felt heavy in my hands, too heavy for just paper. Something inside was wrong, very wrong. I could feel it in the way my parents watched me, their eyes tracking every movement, every expression, waiting for me to open it and sign without reading. They were too eager, too urgent, too afraid of what might happen if I took the time to understand what I was holding. And that fear, that urgency, that desperation, it told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't about helping me. This was about something else entirely, something they didn't want me to see. As I opened the envelope, a sentence jumped out at me and my vision blurred with shock. Revocation of beneficiary rights. The words seemed to float off the page, swirling in the air in front of me, refusing to be understood. Revocation of beneficiary rights. My own family was cutting me out completely. Not reducing my share, not restructuring my inheritance, but eliminating my rights entirely. As if I had never existed. As if I had never been part of this family at all. My breath left my body in one sharp, cold exhale, and for a moment, I thought I might actually pass out from the weight of what I was reading. They didn't even try to sugarcoat it. There was no gentle language, no attempt to soften the blow, no explanation or justification. Just cold, hard legal terminology that stripped me of any claim to whatever this trust contained. My father finally looked at me, but his eyes were dead calm, like this wasn't betrayal, just business. Like he wasn't cutting his own daughter out of a family legacy, just making a practical financial decision. "Alyssa, you're unstable right now. You've made reckless choices. The trust needs protection." The hypocrisy of those words was staggering. I was unstable. I had made reckless choices. The woman who had built a $20 million company through years of discipline and sacrifice was now being painted as irresponsible and untrustworthy by a man who had never taken a risk in his life. Protection for me? The question formed in my mind but never reached my lips. Protection from what exactly? From myself, from my own bad decisions, or protection from the truth that they had never seen me as anything more than a potential source of income. My mother stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was consoling a stranger on a bus rather than speaking to her own child. "If you sign it now, we won't pursue the clause that penalizes irresponsible heirs." The threat was barely veiled beneath the false compassion in her tone. "Sign what we want you to sign, and we won't punish you further. Resist, and there will be consequences." Irresponsible heir clause. The words swirled in my mind, adding to the chaos of emotions already threatening to overwhelm me. So many words that meant only one thing. They assumed I was broke, and they wanted every cent locked away from me before I could touch it. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to protect themselves from any possibility that I might ask them for money. They were securing their own financial future at the expense of mine, and they were using my apparent misfortune as the justification for their greed. The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs and leaving me gasping for breath. Brooke, of course, couldn't resist twisting the knife a little deeper. "Honestly, Liz, you should be grateful. You're terrible with money. You blew $20 million in what, one weekend?" The lie they believed, the lie Simon had told me to tell, had worked perfectly. They thought I had squandered a fortune in a matter of days. They thought I was irresponsible, reckless, undeserving. They thought all the worst things about me, and they believed them without question, because believing the worst of me justified what they were about to do. It made them the heroes of this story, protecting the family legacy from the daughter who would have destroyed it. But then came the moment that would change everything. The viral moment, the humiliation that burned through me like a brand. searing itself into my memory forever. Brooke lifted her phone and pointed it at me, recording as she said loudly, "Look at her. The millionaire who lost it all. Dad, send it to the family group." The request was casual, almost playful, as if she were sharing a funny video rather than participating in the systematic destruction of her sister's dignity. Everyone in the room laughed. My father, my mother, my sister, all united in their mockery of the family member they had just tried to financially destroy. Everyone except me. I didn't laugh. I couldn't. Because behind them the door clicked open and Simon walked in. The laughter died instantly when Simon stepped into the living room. The transformation in the room was instantaneous and absolute. One moment, my family was united in their cruelty, laughing at my expense, recording my humiliation for future entertainment. The next moment, they were frozen in place, caught in the act by someone they hadn't expected, someone who represented consequences they hadn't anticipated. Simon was dressed in a crisp suit, leather briefcase in hand, his expression carved from stone. He looked like judgment itself, walking into this house of lies and demanding accountability. My father stiffened. My mother froze mid-smile, her face caught in an expression of false amusement that now looked grotesque. Brooke lowered her phone, suddenly unsure, her confidence evaporating in the face of this unexpected development. Simon spoke calmly, almost politely, his voice carrying through the silent room like a blade through silk. "Good morning. I see you've already started without me." The implication was clear. He knew what they were doing, he knew what they had planned, and he had arrived specifically to stop it. My mother's voice trembled when she finally found the courage to speak. Why are you here?" The question was almost comical in its transparency. She wasn't asking out of curiosity. She was asking out of fear. She wanted to know how much trouble she was in, how much Simon knew, how much damage control would be required. He set his briefcase on the table with a solid thud that seemed to echo through the house. Because Alyssa didn't lose $20 million. She followed my legal instruction to reveal the truth about this family's intentions. The words landed like explosives in the silent room, shattering the false narrative my family had constructed around my supposed failure. Silence, thick and tangible, filled the space where laughter had been just moments before. My father's jaw twitched. The only sign of the turmoil roiling beneath his composed exterior. Truth about what? He demanded, his voice straining to maintain its authority. Simon slid a folder across the table, much thicker than the envelope they had given me. It landed with a weight that seemed to carry the combined force of every secret my family had tried to keep. Inside were bank transfers, emails, notarized letters, all with their signatures. The evidence of their scheme, laid bare in black and white. "Alyssa," Simon said, his voice steady as a surgeon's, "your parents attempted to reroute the family trust into a private account under your sister's name. If you had signed those papers today, everything your grandmother built would have been permanently transferred out of your reach." My mother's face went pale, the blood draining away like water from a sink. "That's not," she stammered, "that's taken out of context." But even as the words left her mouth, we all knew how hollow they sounded. There was no context that could justify what they had done. There was no explanation that could make this acceptable. They had been caught, and they knew it. Simon tilted his head slightly, regarding her with something that might have been pity but looked more like professional disappointment. "The clause you mentioned, the one penalizing irresponsible heirs. I wrote that clause, and it applies to fraudulent trustees, not beneficiaries." Brooke swallowed hard, color draining from her cheeks as the full weight of the situation began to sink in. They had been outmaneuvered, outplayed. The trap they had set for me had become their own prison. Pain turned to clarity in my chest. Clarity turned to resolve. My revenge would not be loud or dramatic. It would be legal, precise, surgical. It would be exactly what they deserved, delivered in the same cold, calculated manner they had tried to use against me. Simon looked at me and nodded. A small gesture that carried the weight of permission, of encouragement, of partnership in what was about to happen. My cue to begin. I took a slow breath, the kind that steadies a trembling soul right before the blade drops. My parents watched me like cornered animals, angry, frightened, calculating. They still believed they could talk their way out of this. They still thought they could spin some narrative that would make everything okay. They couldn't. I set the unsigned envelope on the coffee table, letting it sit there between us like an accusation. "No," I said softly, my voice steady for the first time since I had walked through the door. "You'll be signing something today." Brooke scoffed, her confidence returning in the face of what she perceived as an empty threat. "You can't force us." The arrogance was breathtaking, even now, even after everything that had been revealed. She still believed she was untouchable. She still believed that our parents would protect her, that the system they had built would shield her from consequences. Simon raised a hand, cutting through her defiance with calm authority. "Actually, she can." From his briefcase, he pulled out a new set of documents. Clean, crisp, devastating in their implications. "Here," he said, addressing my parents directly, "is the formal resignation of your trustee rights, effective immediately. Failure to sign will trigger a court audit of every account you've touched in the last 15 years. My father's face twisted with rage, the composed mask finally cracking to reveal the fury underneath. "You wouldn't dare." 2 words that carried a lifetime of entitlement. He couldn't believe this was happening. He couldn't believe that his daughter, the one he had tried to cut out of the family legacy, had the power to demand anything from him. "Try me," Simon replied, unblinking, unmoved, utterly certain of his position. I watched them crumble in real time. First anger, then fear, then the slow, terrible realization that they were trapped by their own greed, caught in a prison of their own making. My mother's hands shook violently as she looked down at the paperwork, seeing for the first time the consequences of what they had attempted. "Alyssa, please." "We were only trying to," her voice cracked, unable to finish the sentence. Unable to admit what they had really been trying to do. To steal from me, I cut in quietly, my voice carrying through the room with more strength than I knew I possessed. To humiliate me, to record me breaking. Every word was a hammer blow, striking at the foundation of lies they had built around themselves. Brooke pushed forward, desperation cracking her voice for the first time. "You can't take everything from us." I turned to her slowly, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. Not as my sister, not as the favored child, but as a participant in my betrayal. "I'm not taking everything," I said, my voice calm and measured. "Just everything that was never yours." The room fell silent. The truth of that statement hung in the air, undeniable and absolute. They had tried to take something that didn't belong to them. They had tried to cut me out of an inheritance that was mine by right. And now they were facing the consequences of that choice. My parents reached for the pens, their hands shaking, their faces masks of defeated rage. And that was when Simon leaned close and whispered words that would change everything I thought I knew about this day. "Alyssa, brace yourself. They're not done fighting." The warning sent a chill down my spine, but before I could ask what he meant, my father slammed the pen down on the table, signing his name with aggressive strokes that spoke of impotent fury. He glared at me with a rage I hadn't seen since childhood, a time when his temper had been the defining force of our household. "You think you're punishing us?" He growled, his voice low and dangerous. "You're destroying this family." I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, his anger didn't frighten me. "You destroyed it the moment money mattered more than your daughter." The words landed with more impact than any physical blow could have achieved. I watched something shift in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, maybe even shame, before it was buried beneath more rage. Brooke stepped between us, desperation cracking her voice, transforming her from the smug sister who had mocked me to a frightened woman facing consequences she had never imagined. "Liz, please, if Mom and Dad lose control of the trust, I lose my stipend. My condo, my car, I can't afford that." Ah, there it was. Truth finally spoken, naked and ugly in its honesty. Not love, not loyalty, not family bonds or shared history. Dependence. Financial dependence on money that was supposed to be mine. Money that my grandmother had left for her descendants, not for my parents to redistribute as they saw fit. Simon crossed his arms, looking at my family with the clinical assessment of someone who had seen this scenario play out many times before. "You all should know Alyssa is now the sole trustee. Any discretionary payouts will be her decision alone." My family's faces drained simultaneously, the color leaving their cheeks like a receding tide. It was almost theatrical, the way they all reacted at once, the realization hitting them with the force of a physical blow. Everything they had tried to take from me was now firmly, irrevocably in my control. My mother grabbed my wrist, her grip tight with desperation, tears trembling in her voice. "We raised you. We gave you everything. The irony of those words was staggering. Everything they had given me now came with a price tag, a ledger of debts I was expected to repay with my inheritance. I gently pulled my arm free, breaking her hold both physically and symbolically. "You gave me life," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Not love, and definitely not loyalty." The words hung between us, an unbridgeable gap that no amount of money could cross. My father tried one last tactic, the weapon he had wielded against me my entire life. Threatening. "If you do this, you'll regret it. Money can't replace family." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The same man who had tried to cut me out of the family trust was now lecturing me about the importance of family. I met his eyes, steady and unbroken, seeing him clearly for the first time. Neither can betrayal. The silence that followed was absolute. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of everything that had happened pressed down on the room, making the air feel thick and heavy. And then, with hands shaking, defeated and cornered, they signed away their rights. One by one, they added their signatures to the documents Simon had provided, formally resigning as trustees and acknowledging my position as the sole controller of my grandmother's legacy. But just when I thought it was over, just when I believed the worst revelations had passed, Simon leaned close and murmured words that made my heart stutter in my chest. "Alyssa, there's one last thing you haven't seen yet, something your grandmother left only for you." The room seemed to freeze around me, time suspending as I tried to process what he was saying. A final secret waiting to surface. Another layer to this onion of family lies and hidden agendas. Simon reached into his briefcase one last time and pulled out a small velvet envelope, aged and ivory-colored, sealed with wax that bore my grandmother's initials. My heartbeat stumbled, catching in my throat as I stared at the envelope in his hands. "This," he said softly, "was entrusted to me by your grandmother to be given to you only after your parents revealed their true intentions." The implications of those words washed over me like a cold wave. My grandmother had known. She had seen something, predicted something, prepared for something that I was only now beginning to understand. My mother lunged forward, her hand reaching for the envelope with desperate urgency. "No, she doesn't need to see that." But I held up a hand, and for the first time in my life, she obeyed. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that my mother, who had controlled every aspect of my childhood, now stepped back at my command. I took the envelope from Simon's outstretched hand, feeling the weight of it, the significance of what it contained. I broke the seal, the wax crumbling under my fingers like the last barrier between me and my grandmother's final message. Inside was a handwritten letter and a single key, old and ornate, the kind that opened something valuable, something meant to be protected. My grandmother's looping script felt like a hand on my shoulder, a touch from beyond the grave, a final gesture of love from the one family member who had truly understood me. I unfolded the letter with trembling hands and began to read. "Alyssa," the letter began, "I always knew your strength would come from surviving what others tried to break in you." The words brought tears to my eyes, a lump forming in my throat that made it difficult to breathe. "Everything I built is yours now, but this key is the real legacy." I blinked away the tears, trying to see through the blur to the rest of the letter, but Simon was already reaching into his briefcase again, pulling out another document. Under the letter was a second document, property deeds to a private estate in Vermont, worth more than the trust itself. My grandmother had known. She had seen this betrayal coming years before I ever could have imagined it. She had prepared for this moment, created a contingency plan, ensured that I would have something beyond the reach of my parents' greed. The estate in Vermont, the key, the letter, all of it was her way of protecting me from the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. My father's voice cracked when he finally found words. "Mother left that to you." The disbelief in his tone was palpable. He hadn't known. None of them had known. For the first time since walking into this house, I felt nothing toward them. No anger, no sadness, no desperate longing for their approval or their love, just distance. The vast, unbridgeable distance that comes from finally seeing people as they truly are. I folded the letter carefully, treating it with the reverence it deserved, and slipped the key into my pocket. "This family ended itself," I said quietly, my voice carrying through the silent house. "I'm just walking away from the ruins." As I stepped out of the house, morning sun spilling across the driveway in golden streams, Simon walked beside me, his presence a steady anchor in the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. "You didn't lose 20 million, Alyssa," he said, his voice warm with something that might have been pride. "You gained your freedom." I nodded, finally breathing freely for the first time in what felt like years. The truth of his words settled into my bones, becoming part of me. And I'm never letting anyone buy my silence again. The drive away from my childhood home felt like crossing a border between two countries, leaving behind everything I had known and entering a territory I had never explored. The woman who drove toward that house this morning, desperate for her family's love, willing to believe the best of them even when presented with evidence to the contrary, that woman was gone. In her place was someone new. Someone who understood the value of her own worth, who would never again allow herself to be used or manipulated or made to feel small. Someone who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that family isn't always the people who share your blood. The Vermont estate waited for me, a legacy from a grandmother who had seen more clearly than anyone gave her credit for. The trust was mine now, along with everything it contained. But more importantly, my life was mine. My choices were mine. My future was mine. For the first time in 32 years, I was truly free.